everyone, welcome back to Cincinnati Zoo Tales. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Mark. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We're really excited. We're talking native plants. We're talking our Cincinnati Zoo, but not the Cincinnati Zoo proper facility. So this will be a really fun episode, Jenna. We're being joined by Brian Jorg. Brian is the manager of native plant program out at Bowyer Farm. So we're really excited. It's quite a trip to get to the zoo from Bowyer Farm. So thanks for coming in and chatting with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Bowyer is one of my favorite places ever, like in Cincinnati, and I don't get out there often, and it's one of those things that's a part of the zoo, but unless you have a reason to go, you don't really go out there often. But I remember once I went out to help with collecting browse, and the wildlife there is just amazing. It was littered with tadpoles. I don't know if it was just that year, but it was flooded, and I felt guilty getting to the browse because I felt like there were just thousands and thousands and thousands of tadpoles. So anyways, Brian, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are in your career, and then kind of after that we'll touch on what Bowyer Farm actually is.
Sure. My association with the zoo goes back quite a ways. When I was actually preteen, I was taking classes out here as one of the original zoo junior zoologists.
Okay, I didn't know
which
that.
was quite the program.
Awesome.
It was every Saturday was an adventure, and it was a lot of fun, and it really hooked you up with a lot of peers that were also heavily into the outdoors, birds, plants, herpetology, everything, and it really challenged you and helped solidify the direction that obviously I was going to go into. So with that, back in the 70s, I had some great experiences. So in a roundabout way, I got my degree in horticulture and ended up at the zoo about 18, 19 years ago. So I've been here for some time again. And I just love what the zoo has always done, what it stood for. And I came up initially to run the native plant program. Spending all my time outdoors, there's nothing I enjoy more than going out in April in the Smokies and finding orchids and trillium and everything else out there. So to be able to translate that and to work in that field with an organization such as the zoo was a great find for me. So we came up, and with the native plant program in its early inceptions, we were doing a lot of research, a lot of work on propagating rare and endangered species that were given. We were working in conjunction with Fish and Wildlife Service and various organizations. They would find these rare plants, give them to us, and then and sometimes, and a lot of the times in conjunction with crew, we would grow these plants and then actually take them back and reintroduce them into the wild. So we had some really good success stories. When Bowyer Farm came along, it's a neat story. The Bowyer family had seen urban sprawl headed their way, and they didn't want their farm turned into that. So they gave it to the zoo as a gift, and with that, at first we weren't really sure what we were going to do because it was kind of outside our parameters of what we typically do. Well, eventually we found out that part of the soils out there were part of a natural wetland before agriculture came in. So we were able to get some great grants. One of them was the CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program, and with that first grant, we were able to turn marginal cropland back into wetland.
Can I interrupt you for a
Sure.
second? What year was this, and how did you figure that out, that the soil was actually wetlands?
I think somebody from Warren County who was very familiar with the property. It's a unique piece of property. If you look, Warren County is very, very flat for the most part. But there's a ridge that extends across there, and that's due to a glacial deposit that was pushed there. So we have one of the few hills, you stand on it, it's flat all the way around us. So there's a lot of different soils there. So I think different people were looking at the soil maps and realized part of that was actually an ancient wetland. So with the grant, we were able to go in and break up the tiles that were draining the land for farming. So we broke it up, the pipe up, and then we went in and did a little bit of regrading. And when that filled up with water, the wildlife immediately returned.
Wow.
I was out just botanizing out in the wetland. I found half a dozen plants that have no county record. That just the seed was either in the seed bank or whatever reason suddenly shows back up after 100 and some year absence.
Wow.
So that got us really excited. And then having the room out there for the native plant program, because here at the zoo, everything's a chess game and moving things around.
We were landlocked.
And I'd move here, then I'd move over there. Well, that's 630 acres. So we went out there and were able to expand and grow things without the limitations of space. So it started very slow in the beginning, and we started moved the native plant program out there. And then with that space, we were able to grow larger quantities of plants. And then our initial goal was to basically make native plants more accessible to the general public. But that's not just us. We don't want to be exclusive. If we can get every other garden center around here to start growing some of these great plants, that would take the pressure off of us. We don't want to be the only one. We want to push this into the industry. So we go out and we find new plants. And of course, there are no new plants.
I was going to say, how do you know if they're new?
They're new to the industry.
Okay.
So we go out, we find these plants that are really great plants, but why isn't anybody growing these for the public? So we take it, we see if it propagates. There could be a reason why it's not available, because it could be very hard to propagate, or it does not like to live in a pot when you sell it. So we take these and trial them, both as a garden plant and in the production phase of that. And then if it all works out, we say, hey, this is a great plant, it grows well, why aren't we growing it? We will grow it. So our goal is to grow plants that, we don't want to grow black-eyed Susans and things you can find anywhere. We want to grow the stuff that are really good plants that isn't out there. Try to get more diversity out into our landscapes. So we're constantly doing that. So with our expansions out there, our plant sales have grown with that. We're trialing more and more plants. We're doing a lot of work with endangered species. It's very satisfying at the end of the day to go home and feel that you have made the world a little better in some way through that. And that's not even talking about the wetland restorations that we're doing out there, that after the CRP, there was a EQIP grant and then a NACA grant, and now another CRP is in the works, is returning the land that was agriculture back into its native habitat. And I really enjoy that, because you're taking what was a soybean field, and by incorporating plants that were native to that county, getting that out there, establishing it, and then immediately you'll see, we found tiger salamanders this year. And if you've ever seen one of those, it is a massive salamander for Ohio.
I read an article about that. They posted on the zoo's, interweb thing. And were you the one to find it?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. What were you doing when you found it? I don't know. People listening may not know why we're so excited, but salamanders are one of my favorite things in general. But how did you come across it? And if they haven't been found, how do you think it managed to get there?
That is the thing, is we're trying to figure out which vernal pool. It may have come from the NACA grant that we put in a few years ago, may have been where that salamander actually was laid as an egg. So we think that's probably where it came from. But I was out in the middle of the prairie, and we were planting prairie plants. And I run a bobcat with an auger, and as fast as I can auger the holes out, the crew comes behind me, and so we can plant 1,000 trees in a morning, no problem. So we're out there and we're planting, and I augered a hole, and when it came up, I saw salamander come out of the augering hole.
Oh my gosh.
And my first thought is, oh no, the carnage.
Yes.
And I jumped out of the bottom, and I went down there and looked, and I picked it up, and there was absolutely no injury, and I thought that was the coolest thing. But I had to do a little bit of PR with it, because you can't describe a tiger salamander to somebody, but when you see it, everybody's like, wow, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So I showed the crew, I said, this is why we are doing this.
Yeah.
And then we had a meeting that night, and I showed everybody, so this is why we are passionate about preserving all these different parts. And you need all the different pieces. You need a vernal pool. You may say, what's a vernal pool?
Yes, I was going to ask you to describe it.
Vernal means spring, so it's in the spring rains, these pools will fill up, basically large puddles, and they last for a certain period, and then they dry out through the summer. Drying out, it keeps fish from getting established in these puddles. If you have fish, if a salamander lays 1 million eggs, then the fish would eat close to 1 million eggs. So this way, when she lays all these eggs, they all hatch, and as long as that water lasts long enough, they'll go to fruition, and then they'll eventually leave and head out into the landscape and then return back in the spring. So you need varying depths, and tiger needs a little bit deeper because it has to last longer. It has to be wet until probably June or July, because it is a longer time to maturity. And
the eggs are laid in March or April, sometime in there?
Yeah, we're coming up this February. If it starts raining and you get warm enough nights, the Jeffersons will start moving. And there's nothing more fun than going out on a nice February evening in the pouring rain, and you see a salamander migration, and they are just all over the place going to this pool, which is a really cool thing to see.
That's how my husband won me over. That was one of our very first dates, and he took me what we call salamandering, and it's a really cool thing. I hate to tell too many people about it because I don't want to like disturb all the salamanders, but it really is a cool thing to go out on like the warmest, rainiest night of like the early spring, and they're just
It is so
everywhere.
cool. It is so cool.
Do you know how like the genetic diversity is wide enough when they're always going back to the same vernal pool?
The more you dig into it, the more interesting it gets.
Okay.
We're going to try doing some tail snip DNA to try to see, because it used to be everything was contiguous and everything kind of bred, and there was vernal pools all over and everything else. But as we drain more and more, Ohio's lost second most amount of percentage of wetland than any state in the union. Only California's lost 95%, Ohio's lost 90%.
Wow.
So as we get rid of these pools now become disjunct, which means that they do not cross into another pool. And if they're too far apart, then you're only breeding in one pool. Does the genetics... there's a lot of... We don't know what we don't know.
Okay,
and we're hoping that we can kind of figure that out. So our job is we're trying to find these pools and put them in proximity and try to save these genetics before they get lost.
So you're a plant guy at heart, but you are doing a lot with the wetland stuff too? Or you at least
And
know
I'm a lot of things at heart.
And yeah, you're a birder, right?
I'm a birder too,
Yes.
so don't make me choose between them.
So Bowyer is perfect for you out there.
It is. We've seen 208 species of birds on the property so far. Seen some very interesting things out there. We had black-bellied whistling duck out there hanging around for a while, which was really cool. We're doing banding studies out there currently, and it's neat because you get little stories. For example, this fall we caught an indigo bunting early in the season, banded it, it gets its unique band, and we released it. And then 2 weeks later, now when you catch it, you're measuring the wing cord, you're measuring fat, you're measuring age, weights, everything on there. So when we caught that same bird 2 weeks later, it had put on, I think, 60% of its body weight in 2 weeks. Now that's huge because this bird, depending on the species, some of these species fly down to Central America, some fly all the way down to South America and return. Now, if they're underweight, they're not going to survive the trip. If they just come all the way back and they're still underweight, then they just don't breed. So to see that a bird comes to Bowyer, and due to all of the massive amount of plantings and everything else we've put out there, if a species in 2 weeks can put on a massive amount of body weight, its survivability just was greatly enhanced. It still has to survive cats and windows and everything else on the way south. But from the natural standpoint, it's nice to know that we are, as a migratory stopover, very important. And that's happened a couple times. I think we had some wrens and some other things that were very similar, where they were able to beef up while they were there. So
that's amazing, and like that, animals can come and find it. Like you guys have helped bring it back to life, and animals somehow find it.
That's what I was going to say. It speaks to the success of the restoration out there, of how well the animal and plant life is doing. I know you mentioned it used to be agricultural land.
Yeah.
Would you just paint a little bit of a picture of what it looks like out there for the listeners? Obviously, they're not on site looking at the beautiful property. Would you kind of try and paint what the property looks like? Yeah,
when you first pull in, there's about 8 Quonset huts, which is basically where all of our native plants are grown, as well as we do grow ornamental plants for the zoo and the landscape itself here. And there's also, we have the hay barn and the horticulture barn and a few other areas there. But when you go up to the knoll and overlook everything, you'll see a couple lakes, a small pond, wetlands that extend over about 100 acres out there.
I was wondering how much is wetland?
We're right about 100 right now, and I think we're adding another 11 this summer.
Okay.
Those finally filled with water. Filled with water like last week. So the geese have found us. We've had over 500 geese out there. We had a snow goose come in already.
Oh.
So the ducks are moving in. We had ringnecks and mallards and all the other usual species out there. There's some older forests out there, and a lot of that is like sugar maple, which we do a little bit of maple syrup this winter. But it's a low series of hills, along with the flatter areas are all going to be agricultural fields. But it's a typical Ohio farmstead. Some of our woods were probably initially cut over in the 1930s when most of Ohio was timbered. And the challenge is when the deer came in, the deer invasion, and when you have the numbers you have today, when you do have a light gap, it's not being filled in by oaks and the trees you want. It's being filled in by honeysuckle and the like. So some of our woods, some of them are very good. Some of them are more, I would call, just a scrub that could really use a little bit of help of getting the invasives out of there. On all of our invasives, we have probably 15 that we're actively fighting. And that's the Canada thistle, certainly ornamental pear is very high on the list. Phragmites, Lythrum, those are both massive wetland challenges for us. And some of them we have a zero tolerance. As soon as that plant finds up, we nuke it, we take care of it, we eliminate everything in that area, and then we monitor it for a couple of years, make sure no seed got away from us and comes up. Now, when we look at pear, when I arrived out there was already 10,000 pears on the property and growing, so we'll never eliminate that. And you have to be realistic. If you think you're going to go out and take all this pear out of your field in one season, you are going to be sadly disappointed if that doesn't happen. So each one we have a management protocol, and we do try to manage to make it's a fight in progress. We make progress on one front, and then we have a really wet year, and then Canada, the thistle, which is not from Canada, it's actually European, will take over in a wet year, and then you lose ground in that front. But you just constantly fight it. You try to make the effort. Enjoy your small successes and try to look at the bigger picture. And but we're constantly fighting invasives, which if I had a battalion of help out there, it would still fall short of
Wow. I was going to say, when you say we, how many people is it? I only know of 2 of you that are out there full time. Are there more than that?
There's only 2 of us full time.
Okay.
We have 4 very good seasonals.
Okay.
And they do an outstanding job. And then everything else is going to be volunteer. And we have a very good volunteer crew. Everybody's very passionate. I have some volunteers there who predate me at the zoo.
Wow.
So they've been around for over 20 plus years and still love to come out. And we're always looking for good, energetic people willing to make a contribution. So it's a lot of volunteers, and a lot of times it's like herding cats because you've got 1,000 things going in the spring.
I was going to say, it's just so interesting to me. I have so many questions. We keep jumping from, there are so many good things happening out there.
Yeah.
Like the tiger salamander, I have to jump back to that. Did you just put it back? Do you think there are more? And you just
I believe there are.
Did you worry about then using the auger more after that?
I was a little tentative about that. But yeah, it does help dictate, okay, we know this is supporting that species. So how can we effectively manage for that? And we're constantly improving the field. The field didn't have a lot of diversity. It was kind of the goldenrod and thistle and everything else had overgrown. So we're going back in and replacing it with more of the native species out there. So that will only continue to improve. But we knew the sensitivity of the vernal pool, so we were very cautious and certainly cognizant of what the input is. Because the nice thing is, on the wetlands, we own the entire watersheds. So if there's a problem with the watershed, there's nobody else to blame, it's us. So if we do our part, we're going to be fine. So we do testings and everything else out there.
Testing for like the water quality, or
yeah.
Okay.
Well, even something like fertilizer. If we do an agricultural field and we get a little too much fertility in there, then you get an algal bloom, and then it just turns into that green muck that nobody likes.
Okay.
Takes over. So we make sure that we have buffers and run them through aquatic weeds that'll tend to pull some of that. And we do a lot of things to try to make sure, knowing how important it is that a number of species rely on that. And we haven't even talked about our Mighty Oaks program, which is going to be growing tens of thousands of oaks.
Oh my gosh.
Because ever since I was in this field, and you go out and you look at the average landscape, people are afraid of planting large trees. They want that little, flowering Japanese cherry right on the point, which is fine, but you still need the big oaks. You need those trees that are going to be there. They are the cornerstone for practically every species you can name. They're known as being one of the greatest pollinator plants because they'll support over 500 species of Lepidoptera and moths and things that feed on it. The mast, the acorns produced by that, will supply everything from deer to flying squirrels to everything. salamanders actually prefer oak leaves in the vernal pool because it's a little nicer substrate than silver maple. Mm-hmm. So whenever we build a new vernal pool, we'll go in and we'll plant 15, 20 oak around there. So what we're trying to do, and this is getting great support from the zoo, is growing these and then working with communities and try to get these trees out. So we'll go out and we'll find trees with great genetics, trees that have lived in the urban environment for 400 years, and collect those seeds, those acorns, and then we grow them at the farm and then get them back into the community, have them take ownership, grow, and get some of these things out there. So to look that we can add just on that front, 10,000 trees a year, 10,000 oaks a year, I think would have a lot of good.
That's in 10,000 oaks a year is incredible. And we just had Megan Philpott from Crew.
Okay, we're working in conjunction.
She was so excited about this project. I wasn't expecting you to bring it up, but yeah, she was.
Yeah, we're all working. They have their own wing of the oak program. They're working on the endangered species. So we'd like to have a field where we can grow a lot of these scientifically sensitive plants out there, grow them in the field so we can go, and because a lot of them are collecting still germplasm off of and tissues and things like that. So, and then it's great to walk through with homeowners, because a lot of people say, I don't want to try, but it's hard to look at a pot and see a tree that's 3 foot tall and envision what's it going to look like. And this way you walk through there and say, here's a black oak, look at that, it's a great medium-sized tree, just beautiful tree. Here's a white oak, this thing will get a little different look, and they can walk through and kind of visualize a little bit better on what they can then take home and put in their own yard and grow.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you can't really tell from the ones that, well, at least the ones I could afford to buy. I want to buy a big one that's already established and put it in my yard, but I would also like to plant some acorns soon too.
And you just casually dropped the number, but you're planting thousands of these every single year?
Well, I'd love to do that, but then in addition to that is plant another 10,000 just on the farm. And if we do 10,000 a year for a decade, I think we'd really make an impact on the woods out there. But
absolutely.
But the problem is there's so many things out there. It's directing our energy, doing it well. And the nice thing is that we grow 12,000 trees. We give 10,000 communities. We get 2,000 left over. If we don't use them in the sale, then we go out and we plant 2,000 oaks on the property.
Wow.
You can never plant too many oaks.
The oaks that you're selling, is it at the native plant sales that we can talk about in a little bit too, or are you going out to the community and selling them?
The oaks will be separate, but we do have oaks at the sale as well, and it's 3 gallons. So we're not a full service nursery where you can get a 2-inch tree with the balled and burlap on there would weigh about 400 pounds and use the bobcat to load in the back of the truck. Everything we have should be able to fit in a minivan or your backseat of your car.
But where would people find those if they're not coming to Bowyer for them?
If you look at a lot of the bigger nurseries around Cincinnati,
so you're giving them to the nurseries, or for people to
sell?
They
should have their own. Certainly they would have white oaks and red oak, and swamp white seems to be gaining in popularity. But it's our community thing. We're still working out the details with all of that. So we already started growing, because if we didn't start growing, by the time we hit the details, we'd have already missed a year in production. Okay. So we've already got 10,000 in the pipeline. Okay. And then next year we'll have another 10, 12, 15,000 behind them. So.
Okay.
And you guys must have this down to a science out there. Like how quickly is your crew able to plant, I don't know, 100 trees?
Planting is no problem.
Yeah.
We've got it down to basically taking a bobcat with an auger and matching the auger size with the size plant. So if we're doing 3 gallons a day, we take a 3-gallon size auger, and I'm as fast as I can drill. The crew's behind me, dropping the plant in, loosening the roots, fixing the soil, everything else, dropping it in there. And when you do, you can easily do 1,000 plants in the morning.
Wow.
Without breaking a sweat.
Without breaking a sweat, I don't know about that. That's impressive.
And it's nice because it's usually like October, November, so it's not you can't. I don't like to plant in summer or even late spring, because they still have to establish and get through that hot summer. But you plant them in October, November, December. We were out today planting, and you get the plants in the ground, and as long as the ground's above 40 degrees, you'll have root development. They'll be working. So that way, when you start getting into July, August, because these are all over the farm, we would never really effectively be able to go back and water all of these.
Oh, right.
So it's kind of a restoration planting where you plant 1,000 a day, do that several times, get thousands of plants out there. Realize you're going to lose some to deer. In rut season, the bucks will find them like a magnet and rub them and snap them. But if you plant thousands and you say you have 80% success, we'll take that number for long term. So
So what does a normal day look like for you? Because
there are no normal days
I was going
out
to say,
there.
you have all these different projects. How do you decide if you're planting oaks one day or helping restore the wetlands the next day and, birding one day to see what species are out there?
I need my mental break. I need to go out and do some birding. Usually the day before I leave, I kind of have a rough idea of what's going up. Usually when I get there first thing in the morning, between emails, weather, things like that, that's already blown up. It's like they say, the plant will never survive first contact. So as soon as the day starts going, it depends on the temperature. If it's super cold or super warm, depending on whether we're working. If on nasty days this time of year, we're working in Quonsets, we're potting up, we're doing equipment maintenance, getting things ready. In 2 weeks, we'll have plugs come in. And when the plugs come in, those are small plants. They come in, each tray will hold 50 to 72 plants.
Okay.
When they arrive, it's get them in the pots and get them growing. So we'll get 60, 70,000 plants come in, get those potted, which is potting, putting the rice hulls on top as a mulch, getting them labeled properly, getting them in, getting them watered in, and then going to the next variety and doing that. So we will run through that. If it's nice, like this week, we'll go out and we'll do a little bit of invasive, like poison hemlock is already up and growing. Mm-hmm. So we can actually go out and get control on that this time of year, as long as the temperature gets up around 50 degrees.
So you're just kind of searching the woods for things that you need to take out.
And these are mental notes from whenever we see it, everybody has it. So we go, okay, this drainage has it real bad. So we have one of our seasonals going out, and he's basically scouring for that. Wow. Because as soon as that one is next one, then we got, then you're going to have teasel coming up, and teasel's going to need attention. Then it's going to be pear, then it's going to be, it's a honeysuckle. It's going to be a million things. So we have one person working on that. Wetlands and things like that, it's just whenever we have time.
Okay.
The focus is still the pad, which is basically the gravel areas where we're growing all of our plants. And then every once in a while, you just need to go out and today it was dry. I wanted to get the vernal pool in a couple months ago, and after that long dry period, I thought, that's going to be a piece of cake. Well, all of a sudden it rained, and it stayed raining, and then we got 3 inches of rain over 4 days, and everything was wet. And I went out and checked the soil. It was decent, so we were able to get in there, and within an hour, it's all scraped out, ready to go.
Okay, so I was wondering what you needed to do to the vernal pool. So you would clear it out with rakes, or what do you mean by scrape
We'll take
out?
a bobcat in and scrape it, give
so
it a little bit of
that's
depth.
good for it? Okay.
Contour the sides. We'll have oak leaves come in. Oak leaves will be scattered all through there.
Okay, so you're
kind of
helping
seed
nature.
We're speeding it up. Yeah,
okay.
We're speeding it up a little bit because you figure it might take 5 years for all these oaks to get up and drop. We get them in, and then hopefully we get a real good rain. It'll fill with water. We'll put branches in there so they have attachments for all their eggs.
It's almost like a habitat design, but in the
it
wild.
is. It's a lot of fun to sit there, and a lot of time because it's so different. You turn the phone off. You're not near your computer checking emails. You can get out there and just spend an hour in contour and put a rock in. This looks really cool. And it fills with water, and then you come back and you got all those little wiggly, larvae in there in probably less than a month.
Cool.
So we try to do that.
When you said you're doing another 11 acres, does that mean like you're breaking up another 11 acres of tile, or why is it so specific?
We have a field that we're going to be growing hay in, but there's a low spot, and it was too wet to grow anything in there. So rather than drain it, being a conservation organization, let's do the other thing is let's bust the tile up. And with CRP, we'll be able to go in there, we'll get a contractor, and he will scallop out some areas, and then it'll have a grass buffer all around it. So that is actually done through NCR. I forget all my acronyms now. Basically, a division of Department of Agriculture, and they will do the official site engineering, and then a contractor will build all of that, and then we'll go in. We'll still supplement. We'll still put in probably 39. I think we have 40 species of sedge that are native to West Ohio. We'll put those in to keep erosion up, and could be good nesting habitat. We actually have blue-winged teal nesting out there fairly regularly, which is kind of unusual.
Cool.
So they'll nest on our dike. So when they're nesting on the dam, we don't cut the grass. So we say we're not cutting the grass till after June 15th, and that gives her time to hatch the eggs, get all the young down to the water, and then we go ahead and mulch or mow. So there's all these little things that you adjust
Yeah.
for due to species. Because I would never guess we have blue-winged teal nesting on the dam to the major wetland. So, and then when it comes up with red clover, you go through there and it's just absolutely loaded with monarch butterflies.
Very cool.
So rather than mow everything at once, we mow one side of the dike and leave the other side, and they
Okay.
nectar through there. And then when that side gets up, we mow that side, and then the other side by that time will have flowers up. So you don't really reduce the nectaring at all. So just little tweaks on how to manage and still keep everybody, all the species out there, still moving right along. And then we're doing a lot with milkweeds. We're trying to grow. We planted several thousand last year, but we can grow milkweed by seed and get them into plugs, and then have community groups come in, and you get 20 people and our kids in a community group. You go out and you plant plugs, which are the tiny little, small things. You do that in October, November, and you can plant again 1,000 milkweed in a field, and then when that comes up, you do see that you're making an improvement on the habitat.
Yeah,
That's
sounds
amazing.
So cool.
And you mentioned it briefly for a second about the hay production out there.
Yes.
Would you speak a little bit about the food production that you're doing at Bowyer for some of our animals here at the zoo?
Yeah, we have an outside contractor, a farmer who comes in and grows all of our hay for us, and there is some alfalfa. Our hay and alfalfa and everything has to meet a very, very, very high standard. And there's differences between first cut and second cut and all kinds of things. So with the highest standards, being able to control your own process certainly makes things a little bit better. So you do get the quality that's demanded. So he grows all of that, and then that is cut and stored on site, and then it's brought down to the zoo as needed. And I don't know what our total hay production is, but I know we're flipping a few fields and redoing a few new hay fields, so that should help increase production as well. And besides that, there's something called browse. And browse is basically trees or shrubs that herbivores and everybody will either chew on, play with, shred, things like that. And I think we have about I forget how many thousand trees we have in the ground, but we've been doing 2,000 trees a year for a number of years. So there's a lot. And what we do is we actually go out and harvest those every other day. And that will then be bundled, brought down to the zoo, and then it's distributed between the elephants, which eat most of it, and then all the other animals that require it as well. And different species require different ones. So if you have lemurs, it would be a different species than if you're elephant doesn't really care on the species as much. It just can't be red maple. So you got all these little nuances and get everybody fed, and it's kind of an interesting process. We do cut and box those. And then try to store that through the winter, and then those are pulled out, so they still have browse through the entire season. But even when it's cold out there, I know the browse team still goes out and cuts bamboo, and it could be 5 degrees out there, and they're still cutting loads and everything else. So it's a pretty good.
That's something we've talked about a lot more recently. As I've been a keeper for about a decade or more now. It's back when I first started, giraffe were getting browse once in a while, and now it's mandated that they're getting them every day. We're always trying to improve things, and part of that, it's really expensive to have them shipped in from Florida or California, which we've done in the past and still do to this day, but it's so much nicer to have the zoo actually being able to grow their own and box their own and have them all winter long. It's really important for the animals, so I think it's cool that the zoo now has this property that's, they're able to do it themselves.
Yeah, and naturally with the wetland, we have a massive amount of willow, and everybody loves willow. So the problem is it grows almost too much. So as a management standpoint, I have to look and say, okay, we're too thick here, this is good, and if they can cut it and use it primarily for browse, secondarily it helps us in habitat management, so we don't have to go out and worry about too many willow growing out into the wetland or something. So
that's perfect.
Yeah, it's a nice win-win. Our giraffe in particular love the willow, And just to touch on what Jenna said, being able to box it and freeze it through the winter is something so valuable for us here at the zoo. For our animals, we know that they're still going to have browse and good stuff to feed on, or some of the animals that might not necessarily eat it, they nest with it, they still play with it, they still interact with it. So knowing that they're going to have that stuff all winter long thanks to Bowyer is huge on our end as keepers.
Yeah, definitely. Even the giraffe will eat bark and such, so when you guys bring us the dormant browse, that is important for them. So it's really nice to have that program, and I think it's cool that we're growing our own hay, and aside from all the other amazing things you guys are doing out there, it actually impacts the zoo here directly. But you mentioned it's 600 acres out there ish.
Yeah, it's about 630 acres. I
Okay,
believe, so.
and the zoo is like 74, 75-ish or something.
Right around 75, I think.
So
right?
Bowyer's just like this unknown. I don't know. It's just huge, and I've only seen like maybe a couple acres of it. But are you guys like planning on using all 600, or eventually doing something restoration wise?
I think there's some great plans. Whenever we look at anything, it's hard for us not to look at this going, what can make this better? You know, it's like there's a whole lot of honeysuckle. Let's get rid of the honeysuckle and then see what herbaceous. You know, because you still find orchids out on the property. We found putty root orchid out there. Got some very nice colonies of that. And then spiranthes, which is a small white fall blooming orchid, all over out there. Cool. So we're still doing out. You know, we'll have volunteers come in and they just want to go out and do a bird survey.
Yeah.
Let us know what we have, what's nesting on the property. We have a floral committee that basically they go out and I think it's every 2 weeks, and they'll go through and they'll see, oh, we found Phacelia blooming on the back farm today. We didn't know we had Phacelia. It was a real small patch, and it was on the end of an agricultural field, so we actually collected the seeds, and then rather than not have all your eggs in that one very tentative little site, we were able to spread it around and get it more propagated and then back out into the wild. Awesome. So we're still finding out what we have there. We're starting to put out camera traps because apparently there are a lot of bobcat in the area.
Cool.
And we work with ODNR, and they're kind of surprised, like, oh, you haven't seen a bobcat out here yet? I'm like, no. So we're trying to get the cameras up out there. So just to have that first bobcat on it, I'm saying, yes, we have visual proof. And you get plenty of mink and deer and, you know, all the usual suspects, but we keep a list of every amphibian, and John has put together some great lists on here's what should be there, and then here's what has been seen with the probability. So we know we need to find, you know, do we have a two-line salamander out there? Who knows what we have? Plant-wise, same thing. I mean, if we're finding plants that have no county record, we know there's some really cool things growing there somewhere. And then when we find it, what management do we need to impose to keep that or make that expand or not lose it and try to preserve all of these things? Because there's a lot of pieces there. And when you look at the map, if you just go on Google Maps and look at from the south, urbanization is rapidly coming at us. And if you look at the north, it's all warehouses rapidly coming towards us, and they're going to meet. And within our lifetime, that farm is going to be entirely enveloped with urban development. So my goal is with 600 acres, that's more than just a piece of property. It can be an ecosystem. So when everything else is cut off, can we develop that property to still maintain every ecological niche member, everything out there, and keep it happy? You know, can we still have red-shouldered hawks, which urbanize very easily, but a lot of species? Can we still have tiger salamanders, spotted salamanders, Jefferson salamanders, all of these things still thriving in the middle of all of this little, you know, this little island in a sea? And when birds are migrating through, can we still sustain enough species there of plants that when they stop, fuel up, and head south, is that it actually makes a difference?
Yeah, I love the goal of that being able, and then it makes me think, well, we need to buy a couple more 600 acre properties and have you take those over too.
We've dreamt about that. It'd be nice. But
if we do multiple properties, we need to clone you 2 or 3 times so we can run multiple of these properties.
Well, what's nice is a lot of people in the vicinity have come over, and they like what we've done, and they kind of see things, and they, what can we do on our farm to do kind of similar to you? And what do you have? Do you have work with what you have? If you have fields, then look at prairies type stuff. Do you have woods? Woods can still be maintained and improved. Do you have a pond? Do you have a lake? What do you have around there? And getting the right species in there, because it's the plants that help dictate everying else.
That makes sense.
So we're always looking at getting sedges, the carrots, which are not very exciting. They look like tall grass, but they provide nesting cover. They provide, you know, that's where you're going to find all your spring peepers here in another week, or probably this week. all these little things. There's purposes for those. The seeds they put out is incredible for waterfowl. So just put those around the edges. It helps fight erosion and everything else, but yet it's providing seeds so that when you do have wood ducks come in, do you have a wood duck box up? Or do you have a very old sycamore that would have enough cavity in it to support a wood duck nest? But we put up nesting boxes for wood ducks. We have nesting tubes for mallards. We have Canada goose nesting cans, and all of them are occupied. What's interesting is we found out that our wood duck boxes are actually picking up mostly hooded mergansers now.
Huh.
So we have a lot of hooded mergansers breeding out there, which was a shock, but we'll take it. And same thing with tree swallow. We put up bluebird boxes, and it mostly became tree swallows. But then we started putting up prothonotary boxes. So we're trying to take a species. What can we do to improve habitat or do something?
Yeah.
And we do a lot. So we got a lot of stuff just going on. And it's always fun because you still find new stuff that you didn't know was there. And what can we do to make sure that this is not damaged or impacted in any way negatively? And then positively, what can we do to improve that? So
it's just such a cool property.
Yeah.
I cannot remember what year it was that I went out there or what time of year. I wanted to say June, but that sounds so late. Is it still a thing where it floods and there is like tadpole glitter in the water? Or that's what it like. I saw videos of it. Like it was so cool. Or is that, do you think, like a really just rainy season that was abnormal?
we can have some very good years out there, particularly like green frogs, which are the bigger tadpoles. They'll be out there by the tens of thousands.
Okay.
And
we
that's
were like walking through it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Out in the middle of the main, there's a depression. So as the pool dries, everything retreats to the deeper spot. So eventually, if you go out there, it's like a very bad B horror movie where you walk through it, it's just massive amounts of, and then the black vultures will find it, and then the herons will find it, and the raccoons will find it, and the mink will find it. But you figure if you're laying millions of eggs, you only need a small percentage of those to actually reach. And that's what you're doing, is you're fueling the rest of the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. You do feel bad when you walk out there some years, in very dry years. Then you have wet years, and everybody...
It must have been a really wet year then, because I was there recently for some event, and I was like, where was I? Where was this flooded? Because there were two separate ponds that I saw, but I remember it being like one giant flooded area.
Yep.
So maybe it's just like the type of season that you had.
It's all timing out there.
Okay, and little tiny toads everywhere, and I saw a tree frog
June,
and a snake.
Toads are everywhere.
It must have been June. I do think it was June, but that doesn't make sense for tadpoles, does it? Anyways, nobody listening cares about this. I just really, really, really loved that specific experience out there. But in general, Bowyer is like the coolest property to me.
Yeah. Wetlands are just so cool, and everybody just swamps and mosquitoes and everything else. But there's if you have a healthy ecosystem, it's beautiful. We have the hibiscus, which gets those big 6-inch pink or white or red flowers on there naturally. The cardinal Ohio. You have cardinal flower, which is a red cardinal fire engine red, which is perfect for hummingbirds. Queen of the Prairie is a plant that gets 5 foot tall and has like a pink flame on it, and those are all wetland plants. So that, with another 100 other species out there, when that's in full bloom, and you have a healthy ecosystem, and you have purple martins and tree swallows eating mosquitoes. It's really just one of the richest, for me, one of my favorite places to go and explore, whether it's a flooded woods or a wetland or a slough or whatever. It's because you're always jumping sandhill cranes sometimes, or you're jumping rails. We get a lot of sora rails out there, or least bitterns, or something that it's always a surprise when you kick one up and you realize it's really neat to realize that was a cornfield a decade ago,
right.
And today it's thriving and it's absolutely rich with species.
I mean, I'm sure it's felt like a really long time to you in the moment, but it really hasn't been that long with such a huge impact.
When I look back, my daughters were out there before I had any help. We'd go out on a Saturday, and I had to plant 20,000 little tubers, and basically it was nothing but mud everywhere, and you just walk out and just push them in with your thumbs.
Oh my gosh.
And I told them if they planted 20,000 of these, I'll buy them an ice cream. And we have no problem with child labor laws. And they went out on a Saturday, we pushed them all in, and I look back, and they're all now in college, and I'm like, what? It seems like just forever ago.
Yeah.
But now it's turned over. Now my grandson goes out with me, and he works with me, and he does periodically will come out because he loves that, and just to try to get him excited, because I don't think kids today don't have that connection, and unless you can actually get muddy and go chase and not come out of the till you are just absolutely covered and not get yelled at. Say, it looks like you learned something, and that's the stuff that sticks.
Yes.
And when you try to insulate kids from that, and the only thing they have is their telephone, if they're bored with it, yeah, they're going to gravitate towards video time. But get out in the wild and net some frogs. Go out and see bird banding firsthand with somebody who's is federally licensed, and handling them and weighing them and then releasing it back out into the wild. That's the kind of stuff that you need to get hooked on. Mm-hmm. And I think we're missing a lot of that, and it's a challenge.
That's what I grew up doing, but it was also more available
Yes.
because there was more wildlife, like literally just more wild places. And even like the neighborhood I grew up in, like there were ponds and there were frogs everywhere. And I go back now to visit my parents, and I mean, it would be like every step you'd see a frog jumping off land into the water. And now you're lucky if you see one around the entire pond.
You feel really old when you're driving through one. When I was a kid, it's a long field.
I do that. Like,
as far as you can see.
Yes. And I remember, like, in my neighborhood, the little toads everywhere. I can't remember the last time I saw a toad in the wild, aside from that time I went to Bowyer and saw all the babies. But it's just, like, common to find a toad if you're playing outside in the dark at night, and now I don't know.
Well, last time I've seen a box turtle. I mean, that was a kid, you would find those weekly growing up, and now it's listed as I think species of special concern, which is one level above endangered.
Exactly,
and you just don't see something as common as a box turtle anymore. We've yet to find one on Bowyer,
and I think that's why Bowyer is so special to me. I'm like, it reminds me of my childhood. Maybe.
No, that's my thought too. Is like, as you mentioned, as urbanization expands and spreads farther and farther, these places where we can go to connect with nature, they're becoming fewer and fewer over the years. So that makes it more important now than it's probably ever been. But it's definitely a special place out at Bowyer, and I love that the zoo's so supportive of it. Like, I think a lot of zoos would just, you'd care about your 75 acres that you have on site, and you're not going to be too concerned with what's going on a county away, But the fact that our zoo supports it and does put so much energy and resources into it is pretty special.
It's like, native or conservation happening here in Cincinnati, and not like, because we send money all over the world, but this one is actually something that the zoo's building itself and doing, and I think it's really cool. And you mentioned, or I might have mentioned, we wanted to talk about the native plant sales, but also before we get into that, are there programs, because it's not necessarily a public place to go, but are there programs where people can sign up to bring their kids to do like bird boxes or bat boxes, or is that just kind of something you do?
Well, a lot of our bluebird boxes are actually Eagle Scouts that will come to us and say, hey, do you have a program for us? And depending on where we are, it could either be building wood duck boxes or building bluebird boxes. We have the specs and what we like, because we try to keep them uniform since we do nest box surveys on those. But yeah, I know the zoo summer camp actually goes out there for does 4 week-long classes out at Bowyer.
So if somebody wanted to get their kids
through
or
the
family
education
involved,
department, they would have that.
Okay, I don't know if there were any official ones or not.
And then garden clubs, tours, groups that want to come out and just see what we're doing. We're always open for a tour that we can show people exactly what we're doing out there. And then the plant sales, which are listed on the zoo's website, which are our formal sales. And the challenges with those is we have a very, very small parking lot. So we have to have reservations to make sure that we don't exceed capacity on that. But, because I forgot where I was going with that. We do Monday through Friday, as long as we're working there. If somebody wants to buy it, come in. And that would be through the growing season, which would be probably April through October.
Okay.
It's just have somebody stop in and say, hey, I'm going to go down and walk through the frames and pick something up, because I know it can be really a challenge to find a reservation for the formal sales.
Yes.
But we are trying to spread those out a little bit, and the goal is to get these plants out into the landscape. So
very cool. Do you have trivia today?
Yeah, if you're up for it, Brian, I do have some trivia for you guys.
Let's see this.
Yeah, all right, let's do it. So Jenna,
plants and numbers. I'm usually
I
awesome.
I think you're gonna like trivia today, Jenna, because there's no numbers involved at all. There's no years. There's no dates or anything like that.
How many species of
it's
oaks
just native or not.
Okay. Oh.
I'm going to give you a plant species. You're going to tell me whether or not this species is native to the Cincinnati region. Oh, dear. You up for it?
I'm just going to follow Brian's lead.
I'll say, based on all the names that Brian's dropping over there, I think he's going to ace this one.
I think so too.
So we'll start with a gimme, and this is an homage to our past guest, Megan, that we just mentioned a little earlier, the white oak.
Is it native or not?
Is it native or not, the white oak?
Brian nodded yes at me, so I'll say yes. Thanks for
Jenna just slowly.
I was
looked
going
over.
to say yes for what it's worth, but then I felt like maybe it was a trick.
The white oak is native, yeah. And like Brian mentioned, tons of work going on at Bowyer with all the oaks, so we love to see that. All right, how about the pawpaw tree?
Yes.
Yep.
Brian confirms the pawpaw tree is indeed native. Although something I didn't know, it's actually Ohio's state fruit.
Yep.
State fruit of Ohio,
think I
which I
did
didn't
know
realize that. I'm a Kentucky boy, so
Oh.
yeah, I know. I'm one of those weirdos who cross the river.
The coffee tree.
The pawpaw tree. Do we have any of those out of Bowyer? right
Yes,
now?
we. That's one of our most popular trees to sell.
Oh.
If you buy one, you'll probably not get fruit. It has to cross with another species, or
Okay.
not. Or I'm sorry, another tree, another pawpaw, unrelated. So if your neighbor has one or something, you live near the woods, you could. But typically, if you want fruit, is buy a couple of them, and then they'll both fruit for you.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
But yeah, we collect a bunch of those. It's a great pollinator plant for the zebra swallowtail, because that's what zebra swallowtails will lay their eggs on. And actually, in our nursery, you go through the young trees that are only like 6 inches tall, and they will be covered in zebra swallowtail caterpillars, which is really kind of cool to see.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, next one up, we've got wild parsnip. Native or not? Wild parsnip.
I'll say no because we've said yes to all the others.
Brian?
If you have the Latin on that, I could be more specific.
Oh.
I'd have to look up the Latin. I don't have it on me. But
But I know. Yeah, go ahead.
the wild parsnip I have, I can't give you the Latin on it, is not native. Not native.
What a good guess I
I
had.
know, Jenna got it. Jenna got it, but most of it is found throughout Eurasia. But it's something that I didn't know, because you'll see this all over the region. And I actually thought it was native. I didn't know until I was looking up some
There's a
stuff.
lot of those, and a lot of them came over agriculturally, where when they brought cattle and horses over, they would bring bales of hay, and then they'd go out and basically
Plant them.
get hay from wherever they're last, Suffolk, England, and then they'd sail across. And when they get over here, they sweep out the stall, and all those seeds and everything else would then land, and Queen Anne's lace, and all those agricultural weeds, they all came over. Or I also heard that they would fill their bed mattresses with local grasses, and then they would go and come over on the ship, and then dump those out and put fresh in, and then whenever they dump those out, that's when all the seeds and everything came over.
That's so interesting.
Agricultural weeds, when you look at them, there are massive number of them that are.
And they get here in so many different ways.
Different ways.
Never would have thought somebody's bed.
And the world keeps getting smaller. I mean, especially with insects, we
Yeah.
find stuff now that you would never have guessed. We just went to a conference Thursday, and they're talking about new species of ticks.
Oh no.
In Ohio, and it's scary when you start looking at
Yes.
these things just showing up and continuing.
From all over the world, yeah.
Yep.
Yep. All right, we're 3 for 3 so far. Next up, we have honeysuckle. Native or not?
Oh. Well, I know it's invasive, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not native, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And there are different types of honeysuckle.
Yes.
So that's
So if it's Linus or sempervirens, you could
Exactly
say it's a
what I was
native or
gonna say.
native, or if it's Linus or Hackii, it's not.
What about the Amur honeysuckle, more specifically?
Amor?
Amur honeysuckle.
So you can see the Amur, like an Amur tiger, is named after a river over in, where is that? Is it Korea? Or somewhere over there. So anything with amaranths or amur in it is going to typically be located along the Amur River.
Oh, so not native.
Got it.
Very good
Right
answer.
on track. Not native. Perfect. From East Asia region. And you said we've got a lot of problem with honeysuckle right now out of Bowyer.
Yeah.
It seems like
Yeah.
it spreads like wildfire, right?
It does, and it seems like it's probably been in the last, probably since the 70s is when it really just started to basically take off. Nothing likes to eat it. Deer, elephants will, but even I've heard it's even certain times of the year because you get more of a bitter taste to it. But then it's okay. But just trying to control that, because it's so aggressive that when you do have a light gap, rather than your natives jumping in there, that jumps in first and takes everything over. And then there's does it have an allelopathic property where it kind of slows down growth underneath it from other species, and it just gets it can get a very complex
Yeah, tough,
challenge very, very quickly.
Yeah.
tough to manage, absolutely. All right, 4 for 4 so far, heading into the last one. We're going for perfect 100% goldenrod.
It's native.
Brian's nodding along.
I'm not guessing today. Brian's just helping me answer.
Yeah, there's probably 74, 75 species around eastern U.S. that it's a huge family, and the problem is everybody's goldenrod, that's hay fever. The problem is you sneeze, look out the window, and you see goldenrod. The challenge is it's not goldenrod. It's the theobroma, can't think of the common name. Ragweed. Ragweed is what you're sneezing, but it has a green flower, and you never see that one per se. But solidago goldenrod has a very, very heavy pollen. It has to be physically moved by insect or something else. So it's not being airborne. So it's not giving you hay fever. Some of them are thugs. They will absolutely take over areas. But there's a number. We actually went through and looked at all the species, pulled our favorites out, and we found 5 that were great candidates for the garden. They don't run. They stay clump formers. The nice thing is they will actually be flowering late in the season. So if you're a monarch and you're leaving Nova Scotia and you're flying all the way down to Mexico and you're flying through a garden in October, how many plants out there do you have that it's going to be able to? They're going to be able to fuel up and continue on. And goldenrod is one of those plants that will bloom very late in the season. So you can have that out there, and it's great for a myriad of pollinators. But everybody gets goldenrod. Well, there's a myriad of goldenrod. Pick the ones that will work for you. And we have showy and riddles and stiff and a few other varieties that we can show you if anybody stops out there. That these are ones that will perform much better and not be a garden thug. Because we don't want to give the wrong plant to the wrong person. What do you need? What are your parameters? What do you want it to do? Are you a formal gardener? Are you one more naturalized? Is it sun? Is it shade? Is it wet? Is it dry? And then find the plant that works best for you, and then that way everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And
so I find it hard to find native plants, or just I don't know much about them in the soil they need in the sun. I know there's little tags on a lot of them, but I do find it hard, even at nurseries I've been to know what are native and what would be good. But we can find all of this at Bowyer.
Yeah, at any of our sales, all of our staff is that they've been working with these plants for years. Most of them grow most of those plants out there. And I don't like to grow a plant or sell a plant if I haven't grown it myself and killed it at least 5 times.
I'm really good at
because
that.
you got to know when is it too dry, when is it too wet. You got to figure all these things out. So when you're talking with somebody, it's just know. Like all you need to know is what kind of sun. Is it sun or shade? For how long? And then even sunlight's not really equal, because if it's July, August, and you get sun in the morning or sun in the evening is going to be much more powerful, because the plant is going to be high temperature of 98 degrees. If you give it sun in the morning, it's still getting the benefits for photosynthesis and blooming and everything else. But then when it gets super hot, then if it's in shade, it actually sometimes will help some plants. So there's a little bit of things there, but you can't overcomplicate it. Basically, do you have nasty heavy clay? Do you have good soil, wet, dry, sunshade? And if you know the cultural requirements, just come out and start talking to some of our volunteers. And certainly everybody has a phone. You can sit in there right away and start punching up. There's some great websites out there that will tell you. The zoo's done a ton of work with best plants for pollinators, and then find out. Broad-toothed mint. I don't common names right. Pycnanthemum muticum is a great plant. The problem is, a plant can go by 57 different common names, and some plants will have the same. It's just so Pycnanthemum. It's a nice aggressive plant. It's beautiful silvery foliage and gets these really white blooms on them. And whenever you look at a pollinator study, that plant is always number 1. So if you want one plant in your yard that is absolutely going to take care of a wide array of insects, that would be the plant to get. Okay. And but everybody thinks native. You start thinking of purple coneflowers and black-eyed Susans, things like that. But this is probably the absolute greatest pollinator plant. But yet it's not got one of those common roll off your tongue. That's my first thought. Go with this. But if you're out there and you talk and to our people, and a lot of it is we do try to grow them on the property. So if you want to see the plants at maturity. Particularly our woody plants, is we're trying to get them around the ground so people can walk through and say, I really like this, what is this? And then you can say, that's American hazelnut. And then what are the requirements? And then go from there and really try to get the right plant in the right place and get your own piece of nature in your backyard and go from there.
How did you learn all of these different types of plants? Like, it's one thing to even know their names, but you know all the Latin names, and then you know where they should grow. And how did you do?
I just make it up as I go.
Like, is it looking at books? Like, if somebody were interested in this, or you're just really good at it, it comes naturally to you. Like, identifying plants is not easy, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is
And
really
then to
tough.
even
When I was younger, it was a
names.
lot of books and a lot of field time. We were lucky. Dad would actually change his hour, so he'd go in super early, like 4 o'clock in the morning. Then he'd get home at 2, and then we would always go down. We were going down to Shawnee Lookout every evening, or we were going to the other different places. And just being out, you just see things that stick with you. And I remember, you think you found this really cool plant, you come back, you look it up, and it's like jewelweed or something. And but as a kid, it was still that exploration.
Yes.
And it's just a lot of books, and then it was just then a lot of field time.
Do you remember words easily? And
When I was younger, yes. As I get older, it's like I know that it's in there somewhere. I just have to tease it out. But I could memorize those, and then but then growing up, I was mostly into ornithology. But then going out, you saw the plants, and then when you realize everything's connected, nothing exists in a vacuum. As everything is connected.
That's a good point.
Is where would you find the waterfowl? Well, if the water's 6 inches deep, that's where your teal are going to be. But out in the 8-foot deep part, that's where your bluebills are going to be. And you realize that nothing is random. Everything has a purpose and why. So even now, we'll go out and look at the wetland, and a lot of ducks are feeding in this corner, but nothing over here. Well, why isn't that productive? And then we would look at it, and is it smartweed grows over here, but not over. As we try to just make sure that we're constantly trying to improve through observation and just watching and go from there.
Well, it seems like you're the perfect guy to be out there at Bowyer in that
Absolutely.
role.
It's better to be lucky than good. So
Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we finish up? Did you have anything we didn't talk about at Bowyer or anything?
no, I think we're good. I think that what we're doing is just on a large scale, and I think anybody in their home situation, if you have a little bit of a backyard, anybody can put a pawpaw back there, or put for zebra swallowtails, or you could put in a plant called wafer ash, and that attracts giant swallowtails for their larvae. But there's a lot of things you can do, and even on a small scale, every little bit helps. And that's what you have to look for is you might not have 600 acres, but if you have a standard city lot, you can put in the right tree, put in an oak, and that alone will attract so many species of birds and pollinators. And you go out there and see a big cecropia moth on there. When I was a kid,
Those are
that butterfly, that moth that big will change your life.
Yes.
It's something you think you just found, like the Yeti or something.
Yeah.
So I think you just answered the what can I do, and I don't want to stop you, but your answer. Do you have anything really specific or something? An easy action item, or do you just suggest?
I think it is what do you enjoy? If you like seeing monarchs, plant some milkweed. Now, common milkweed is a great plant, but if you have a small yard, it might be a little too, might run for you too much. So then look at swamp milkweed, which will grow in good garden soil despite its name. It's pink instead of either the pink and white of the common or the orange of the tuberosa. But we found that it from a larval ability, it will attract them very, very heavily. So if you like monarchs, plant that. If you like birds, there's a number of trees out there that, if they have fruit, you'll attract mockingbirds and who knows, maybe cedar waxwings. If you like watching your squirrels, plant a hickory or something. Walnut would be nice, but when you start dropping walnuts on your garage or something, it's like artillery coming in. But yeah, what are you into? Or just everything. A small vernal pool, if your yard is big enough.
I like that.
You can put in a little vernal pool back there.
So salamanders could find their way to a new vernal pool?
There's a lot of people, as we get out from the city, there's a lot of areas that will abut up against woodland areas, especially down here would be redback salamanders, which when I was a kid I would find those everywhere. Today you don't see them as much, and is it because vernal pools are all drying up or getting filled in, or what's the reason? But they're very sensitive to environmental conditions because they absorb everything through their skin. So whether it's you're putting down, broadleaf lawn or something over that, they will absorb that, and it's not good for them. But just look at different things, and there's plenty out there to do.
Yeah.
Feel free, if you see an event at the Bowyer, come on out or stop out for the plant sale and look us up and see what you're into and talk through it and find something that works for you and adds a little bit of enrichment in your life, whether it's planting cardinal flower out there just so you could watch the hummingbirds come and go.
Yeah.
Because when they come in, they start fighting over the flowers. It's really interesting. Or just planting purple coneflower, and then when they go to seed, you'll have the goldfinches come in, and when you walk by and they explode out of there, it's always fun. But there's always something that you can do right in your own backyard. And if everybody did a little bit like that, it would be the same thing as having a 600-acre farm. Talk your neighborhood into everybody growing
That's a great
2
idea.
plants in their backyard. It's great for wildlife.
Yeah.
And then now you have an urban botanical garden where everybody's garden kind of works conjunctively.
Exactly.
And then it all
That's a great
it all
idea.
works.
Should drop off 2 plants at each doorstep. Please plant these. That would be awesome.
That's a great idea. And you
Yeah.
mentioned the zoo's native plant sale. Will you go over one more time just the days, the time of year, the hours?
They'll be
for that?
posted. I know we're
Okay.
finalizing those. We'll post those on the zoo's website. We do sell out fairly quick, but if you stop by Monday through Friday, April to October, 8 to 2, we will probably be there. We could be in the back 40 doing some planting oak trees, 10,000 oak trees, but that would help us basically. Or if you come out, it would help you basically to get in, and you can walk through, take your time. We have shade, sun, and woody trees and shrubs, and we'll find something that will work for you. So, or just buy a couple of pawpaws and enjoy the fruit, enjoy the zebra swallowtails. It's a small tree. It's like Jell-O. There's always room for a pawpaw.
Well, thank you so much for joining
thanks
us
for having
and
me.
all the work you do out there. It makes me want to go there right now. But
Yeah.
we suggest everybody getting out there to buy a native plant or 2 and just see the beautiful property. Definitely.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all the work you do out there. Thanks for your journey in to come see us,
Oh.
too. I know it's a bit of a hike to come down to the zoo, so appreciate you coming in.
Well,
and
thanks for
taking
having
the
me.
time. Yeah. And thanks to everyone out there listening to this episode. It's a pleasure like always. Until next time.
Have a good one.